I stared at the Hawaii vacation brochures scattered across our kitchen table, my work boots still caked with concrete dust from another 14-hour shift. Mom was humming while she packed sunscreen into a brand new suitcase, and my sister Cassie twirled around showing off her new bikinis. When I asked if there was room for one more on their dream getaway, Mom didn't even look up. She just said they could only afford 2 tickets, and Cassie deserved this after graduating college. 28 years of being their financial backbone, and I finally understood the truth. I was nothing more than their personal ATM. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I stood there in my own kitchen, watching my mother carefully fold designer swimwear that cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. Cassie pranced around in a sundress that probably cost what I made in 2 days of backbreaking construction work. "Beau, you understand, right?" Mom said without looking at me, her voice carrying that familiar tone of false sweetness she used when she wanted something. "This trip is really important for Cassie. She's been working so hard at school." Working hard. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I thought back to all those nights I came home exhausted, my hands bleeding from handling rebar and concrete blocks, only to find Cassie lounging on the couch I bought, watching Netflix on the television I paid for, eating takeout Chinese food that somehow always appeared when she was hungry. I remembered being 19 when Dad died, suddenly, of a heart attack. I was 2 years into my engineering degree at State, finally feeling like I had a future ahead of me. Then everything changed overnight. Mom sat me down in this same kitchen, tears streaming down her face, explaining how Dad's life insurance wasn't enough to cover the mortgage and Cassie's high school expenses. "It'll just be temporary," she promised back then, her hand squeezing mine across the wooden table. "Just until I can get back on my feet. You're so strong, Beau. You've always been the responsible one." 9 years. 9 years of 60-hour work weeks in the blazing Georgia sun and bone-chilling winter mornings. 9 years of living in the basement while Cassie got the master bedroom with the walk-in closet and private bathroom. 9 years of driving my beat-up Ford pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it while Cassie got a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday. "Where did you say this trip was costing again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, you know how these things are." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Just a few thousand, nothing too crazy." A few thousand. I excused myself and walked upstairs to use the bathroom, but instead I slipped into Mom's bedroom. She'd always been careless with paperwork, leaving bank statements and bills scattered across her dresser. It took me less than 5 minutes to find what I was looking for. The travel agency receipt was tucked inside a manila folder labeled Hawaii Dreams. $12,000. $12,000 for 10 days in Maui, staying at a luxury resort with ocean views and spa treatments included. My legs felt weak. I sank down onto Mom's bed, staring at the numbers on the receipt. $12,000 was exactly what I'd been paying each month between the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and what Mom called household expenses. Money that came directly from my construction paychecks, handed over without question because I believed we were struggling to make ends meet. I pulled out more papers from the folder. Credit card statements showing charges at expensive restaurants, designer clothing stores, and beauty salons, all dated within the past 6 months. All while Mom told me we needed to tighten our belts and couldn't afford to fix the water heater in my basement bedroom. The sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs. I could hear Cassie describing all the excursions she wanted to book once they arrived in Hawaii. Snorkeling adventures, helicopter tours, dinner cruises. Each activity costing hundreds of dollars that I had unknowingly provided through my belief that we were a family helping each other survive. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to go back to school to finish my engineering degree. Every time I brought it up, Mom would get that worried look on her face and start listing all our financial obligations. The house payment, the insurance, Cassie's college tuition and expenses. I'd always backed down, convincing myself that family came first. But as I sat there holding evidence of their luxury spending, a different picture began forming in my mind. All those nights I'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner while they ordered pizza. All those times I'd worn the same work clothes until they fell apart, while Cassie complained about needing new outfits for every social event. All those weekends I'd worked overtime instead of having any kind of social life, believing that every extra dollar was crucial for our family's survival. The most painful part wasn't the money. It was the realization that while I'd been sacrificing my youth, my education, and my dreams, they'd been living like royalty and viewing my contributions as their right rather than my gift. I heard Mom calling my name from downstairs, probably wondering where I disappeared to. I quickly put the papers back exactly where I found them and headed back down to the kitchen, my mind racing with questions I'd never thought to ask before. "There you are." Mom smiled brightly. "Cassie was just saying how much she's going to miss you while we're gone." Cassie looked up from her phone where she was posting photos of her new vacation wardrobe. "Yeah, it's going to be so weird being away for 10 days. You'll take care of everything here, right, Beau?" Take care of everything. Like I always did. Like I'd been doing since I was 19 years old, believing that this was what love looked like. But as I stood there looking at their excited faces planning their luxury vacation with money earned from my physical labor, I realized that love was supposed to flow both ways. The next morning, Mom and Cassie left early to go shopping for last-minute vacation essentials. They'd be gone for hours, hitting every mall in a 30-mile radius to make sure Cassie had the perfect wardrobe for every possible Hawaiian scenario. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My foreman Jack was surprised but understanding when I told him I had some urgent family business to handle. If only he knew how urgent. Once their car disappeared down the street, I went straight to Mom's bedroom. The manila folder had just been the beginning. If she was hiding a $12,000 vacation, what else wasn't she telling me? I started with her dresser drawers, methodically searching through everything. In the bottom drawer underneath her winter sweaters, I found a small metal lockbox. The lock was one of those basic 4-digit combinations. I tried Dad's birthday, then Cassie's, then Mom's. Nothing. Then, almost as a joke, I tried my own birthday. Click, the box opened. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen before. Not the joint checking account where my paychecks were deposited, but a separate savings account in Mom's name only. I pulled out the most recent statement with shaking hands. The balance showed $43,827. I had to read it 3 times before the number sank in. Nearly $44,000 accumulated over the past several years. Money that had been skimmed from my contributions, while she told me we were barely scraping by. But that wasn't the worst part. Underneath the bank statements were property documents for an address I recognized but had never connected to our family. It was a small rental house about 20 minutes away in a decent neighborhood near the community college. The deed was in my grandmother's name, but there was a transfer document dated 3 years ago, right after Grandma Rose passed away. The property had been left to Mom in the will, but she'd never mentioned inheriting anything. In fact, when Grandma died, Mom had gone on and on about how sad it was that there was nothing left to help with our financial struggles. I kept digging through the paperwork. Rental agreements showing that the property had been leased continuously for the past 3 years, with monthly rent of $850 going directly into Mom's private savings account. $850 a month for 36 months. Over $30,000 in rental income that I'd never known existed. My hands were shaking as I pulled out more documents. There were receipts for expensive jewelry purchases, spa day packages, and weekend getaways to Atlanta that Mom had claimed were work conferences for her part-time job at the insurance office. At the very bottom of the box was something that made my stomach drop. Mom's cell phone bill, but not the basic plan she'd always claimed we couldn't afford to upgrade from. This was a premium, unlimited plan with international coverage and insurance for the latest iPhone model. I photographed everything with my phone, making sure to capture every detail clearly. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and moved to the next phase of my investigation. Mom's computer was in the living room, an expensive laptop that she'd said was a necessity for her work. I'd paid for it naturally. She'd never been good with technology, so her password was probably something obvious. It took me 4 tries to get into her email account. The password was Cassie 2019, the year my sister graduated high school. What I found in her inbox was worse than anything I'd discovered so far. Months of email exchanges between Mom and Cassie with subject lines like Beau's latest deposit and how much this month. I opened the most recent thread dated just 2 weeks earlier. Cassie had written, "Did the deposit come through yet? I need to book the snorkeling thing before all the good times are taken." Mom replied, "Yes, honey." Beau came through as always. He's so predictable. I swear he'd work himself to death if we asked him to, and he'd probably thank us for the opportunity. Cassie's response made my blood turn cold. LOL true. It's almost too easy. He actually believes we're struggling. I showed him my tuition bill and he offered to pick up extra shifts to help with the payment. I didn't have the heart to tell him I got a full scholarship. A full scholarship. Cassie had received a full academic scholarship to the state university covering tuition, room, board, and books. For 4 years, I'd been working overtime to help pay for college expenses that didn't exist. I scrolled through more of their messages, each one revealing another layer of their deception. They'd been coordinating their stories, making sure their lies about our financial situation remained consistent. They'd been laughing about my willingness to sacrifice everything for family that was supposed to mean the world to me. But the final email exchange was the one that shattered whatever remained of my heart. Cassie had asked, "What are we going to do about Beau long term? I mean, I'm graduating soon and you're getting older. We can't keep this up forever." Mom's reply was dated just 6 months ago. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart. I've been thinking about our exit strategy. There are some options that would leave us very well set up for the future. We just need to be patient a little while longer." Exit strategy. They'd been planning to get rid of me all along once they'd extracted everything they could from my labor and my love. I printed out the most damaging emails and bank statements, then cleared the browser history so they wouldn't know I'd been investigating. But before I logged out, I noticed one more folder in Mom's email that I hadn't checked yet. It was labeled Real Estate and contained correspondence with an agent in Tampa, Florida. Mom had been inquiring about condominiums near the beach in the $500,000 range. The most recent email showed she'd already put down a deposit on a 2-bedroom unit with a view of the Gulf of Mexico. They weren't just planning to leave me behind. They were planning to disappear entirely, taking everything I'd worked for and starting a new life in Florida while I was left with nothing. I finally understood why they'd seemed so excited about this Hawaii vacation. It wasn't just a reward for Cassie's graduation. It was a celebration of the successful completion of their long-term plan to financially drain me dry. As I sat there in the living room I'd furnished with my own money surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I felt something shift inside my chest. The hurt was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. Something colder and more focused. They thought I was predictable. They thought I was too stupid and too loyal to ever figure out what they were really doing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the rest of that morning going through every document in the house with methodical precision. What I found in Mom's bedroom safe made everything else look like minor infractions. The safe was hidden behind a painting of sunflowers that hung above her dresser. I'd helped her hang that painting 5 years ago when she'd redecorated the room, but I'd never known what it was concealing. The combination turned out to be my birthday again, which would have been touching under different circumstances. Inside the safe were insurance documents I'd never seen before. Not the basic life insurance policy Dad had left, which barely covered his funeral expenses, but a massive term life insurance policy on me that Mom had apparently taken out 3 years ago. The coverage amount was $1 million. The beneficiary was listed as Linda Marie Thompson, my mother, with my sister Cassie as the secondary beneficiary. My hands were trembling as I read through the policy details. According to the paperwork, I'd supposedly applied for this coverage myself and authorized the monthly premiums to be automatically deducted from my checking account. But I had no memory of ever signing these documents. I looked closer at the signature page. It was my name written in handwriting that looked like mine, but something felt off about it. The loops in the letters were slightly different from how I normally sign things. It was a good forgery, but it was still a forgery. Underneath the insurance policy were printouts from various websites. Articles about construction accidents, workplace fatality statistics, and the average time it takes for insurance companies to investigate suspicious death claims. One article was highlighted in yellow marker, Common Causes of Fatal Falls in the Construction Industry. There were also printed copies of OSHA violation reports from construction sites around the state, with particular attention paid to companies that had been cited for safety violations. My current employer, Johnson Construction, was on that list. I found a small notebook filled with Mom's handwriting. The entries were dated over the past 8 months, and they read like research notes for planning a murder. Beau working on the Morrison high-rise this month, 18th floor. Safety inspectors haven't been around lately. Asked Beau about his safety equipment today. He mentioned his harness has been feeling loose, suggested he should get it checked, but maybe not too urgently. Johnson Construction got another OSHA citation last week. Perfect timing if something were to happen soon. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. Beau's been taking on more dangerous jobs to save extra money for family emergencies. He's so dedicated. This could work out perfectly. My vision started to blur as the full scope of their plan became clear. The financial exploitation had just been Phase 1. Phase 2 was my death carefully orchestrated to look like an accident so they could collect $1 million insurance payout and disappear to their Florida condo. I photographed every document in the safe, then kept searching. In a manila envelope marked legal documents, I found correspondence with a probate attorney in Tampa. Mom had been asking about the process for transferring property assets after an unexpected death, and how quickly insurance proceeds could be made available to surviving family members. There were also draft copies of a will that would supposedly be found after my death, leaving everything to Mom and Cassie. According to the paperwork, I'd apparently been planning to change my will to reflect my growing concerns about my dangerous job and my desire to take care of my loving family in case anything happened to me. But the most chilling discovery was in a folder labeled Contingency Plans. Inside were detailed notes about my work schedule, the projects I was assigned to, and the safety protocols at various job sites. Mom had been tracking my movements and identifying opportunities for accidents with the precision of a predator stalking prey. One page contained a hand-drawn diagram of the high-rise building where I was currently working, with notes about which floors had the least safety oversight and which areas would be most likely to result in accidental eased falls. Another page listed the names and phone numbers of workers at my company who had previously been cited for safety violations or who had drinking problems, potential witnesses who could be blamed if something went wrong with their version of events. The final page in the folder was a timeline titled Project Completion. It showed their Hawaii vacation scheduled for the following week, followed by a 2-week period marked Implementation, then Florida Relocation, scheduled for 6 weeks later. Implementation, they were planning to kill me within 2 weeks of returning from their luxury vacation. I had to sit down on Mom's bed as the reality of the situation hit me. These weren't just people who had been taking advantage of my generosity. These were people who had been systematically planning my murder while I worked myself to exhaustion to provide for them. Every conversation over the past few months took on a sinister new meaning. Mom's questions about my work schedule weren't motherly concern about my long hours. They were intelligence gathering for an assassination plot. Cassie's sudden interest in my daily routine wasn't sibling bonding. She was helping to establish patterns that would make my death seem predictable and accidental. Their insistence that I take on the most dangerous jobs wasn't pride in my work ethic. It was positioning me for a convenient workplace fatality. I thought about all the times Mom had encouraged me to skip safety meetings or hurry through equipment checks because family time was more important. All the times she'd suggested I was being too cautious or overthinking simple procedures. The woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who had claimed to love me more than life itself, had been methodically planning my murder for months. And my sister, who I'd protected and provided for since she was 9 years old, was enthusiastically participating in the plot. As I sat there surrounded by evidence of their intentions, I felt something inside me break permanently. Not just my heart, though, that was certainly shattered beyond repair. Something deeper than that. Some fundamental belief in human decency that I'd carried my entire life. But as that belief died, something else was born. A cold, calculating determination that matched their own. They thought they were the only ones capable of long-term planning and strategic thinking. They were about to discover how wrong they were. I carefully returned everything to the safe exactly as I'd found it, then went downstairs to begin planning my own version of project completion. The difference was that my project would leave them alive to face the consequences of their choices. I drove straight to the offices of Patterson, Williams & Associates, the most respected law firm in our county. I'd done construction work on their building 2 years earlier and remembered the senior partner, Robert Williams, as a straight-talking man who didn't tolerate nonsense. "Mr. Thompson," Williams said as I sat down in his office with a manila folder full of evidence. "What can I help you with today?" I spent the next 2 hours walking him through everything I'd discovered. The forged insurance policy, the hidden bank accounts, the rental property income, the murder planning documents. Williams listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and whistled softly. "Son, what you've described constitutes multiple felonies," he said. "Insurance fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit murder, theft by deception. Your mother could be looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison." "What about my legal rights to the house?" I asked. Williams pulled out the original mortgage documents I'd brought with me and studied them carefully. "This is interesting," he said after several minutes. "When you signed these papers 9 years ago, you weren't just agreeing to make payments. You were listed as a co-borrower, which means you have legal ownership rights to the property." He explained that because I'd been making all the mortgage payments for 9 years, and because my name was on the original loan documents, I actually owned 50% of the house, regardless of whose name was on the deed. Mom couldn't sell the property or use it as collateral without my written consent. Furthermore, Williams continued, "If you can prove that your mother has been using your mortgage payments for her personal expenses while telling you the money was going toward the house payment, that's another form of fraud. You could potentially claim ownership of a much larger percentage of the property." He also explained that the life insurance fraud alone was enough to have Mom arrested immediately, and that the evidence of murder planning would likely result in attempted murder charges even though they hadn't actually carried out their plan yet. "What would you like to do with this information?" Williams asked. I'd been thinking about that question all morning. "I don't want to see them in prison," I said. "As angry as I am, they're still my family. But I want them to face consequences for what they've done. And I want to make sure they can never hurt me again." Williams nodded. "We have several options. We could pursue criminal charges, civil litigation, or we could use this evidence as leverage to negotiate a settlement that protects your interests without destroying their lives completely." We spent another hour developing a strategy. Williams would prepare legal documents giving me full ownership of the house in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. Mom would be required to transfer ownership of the rental property to me as restitution for the money she'd stolen over the years. She'd also have to close the fraudulent life insurance policy and return any premiums that had been paid. Most importantly, Williams said, "We'll get a restraining order that prevents them from contacting you or attempting to interfere with your life in any way. If they violate that order, then we pursue the criminal charges." He also suggested that I document the current condition of the house and create a detailed inventory of everything I'd purchased over the years. If I was going to claim ownership of the property, I needed to be able to prove which furnishings and improvements came from my money. "How long do I have before they get back from Hawaii?" Williams asked. 8 days, I replied. "Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to get everything in order." "But Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, are you sure you want to stay in that house? Given what they were planning, it might be safer for you to relocate entirely." I'd already thought about that. "No, I'm keeping the house. I've put 9 years of my life into that place. They're the ones who need to leave." Williams smiled grimly. "Then we'll make sure that happens. But first you need to secure all your assets and make sure they can't access anything that belongs to you." Over the next 3 days, I systematically separated my life from theirs. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution and arranged for my paychecks to be deposited there instead of our joint account. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box so they couldn't intercept any legal documents or financial statements. I also contacted the Human Resources Department at Johnson Construction and discovered something that infuriated me even more. For the past 3 years, Mom had been listed as my emergency contact and as the beneficiary for my company life insurance policy. She'd called HR multiple times asking about the details of my coverage and when benefits would be paid out in case of a workplace accident. I immediately changed my emergency contact to my friend Marcus, a guy from work, who'd always been straight with me, and removed Mom entirely from my company benefits. The most satisfying part of my preparation was creating a complete inventory of everything in the house that I'd purchased. I went room by room with a camera documenting every piece of furniture, every appliance, every electronic device, every tool, and every improvement I'd made to the property. The list was extensive. In 9 years of believing I was contributing to our family's well-being, I'd essentially furnished and equipped the entire house. The washer and dryer, the refrigerator, the microwave, the dishwasher. The living room furniture, the dining room, set the king-size bed in the master bedroom that Mom slept in, the 65-inch television, the sound system, the gaming console that Cassie used. I'd also paid for major improvements like the new roof, the updated electrical system, the renovated bathroom, and the deck in the backyard. According to Williams, all of those improvements added to my ownership stake in the property. As I worked on the inventory, I realized that without my contributions, Mom and Cassie would be left with almost nothing. Their personal belongings consisted mainly of clothing and a few pieces of cheap furniture they'd owned before Dad died. On the 6th day of their vacation, I received a text message from Cassie showing off their luxury hotel suite and asking if I was holding down the fort okay. I responded with a simple, "Everything's fine here. Enjoy your trip." She had no idea that by the time she got home, the fort would belong entirely to me. Williams called me that afternoon to confirm that all the legal paperwork was ready. "We've prepared ownership transfer documents, restraining orders, and a complete settlement agreement," he said. "I've also been in touch with the district attorney's office. They're very interested in the insurance fraud evidence, but they're willing to hold off on charges if your mother agrees to our terms." "What if she refuses to sign?" I asked. "Then she'll be arrested within 24 hours, and your sister will likely face charges as an accomplice. The evidence you provided is overwhelming. They don't really have a choice." That evening, I stood in the house that had been the center of my world for 9 years, looking around with completely different eyes. This wasn't the family home where I'd sacrificed my youth to keep us all together. It was a crime scene where 2 people had systematically exploited and betrayed someone who loved them. But it was also about to become something else entirely. My home, my property, my fresh start. For the first time in 9 years, I was going to live somewhere that truly belonged to me. Mom and Cassie's flight was scheduled to arrive at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 3:45 on Sunday afternoon. I knew this because Cassie had been posting their entire itinerary on social media for weeks, sharing every detail of their luxury vacation with her followers. At 4:30 that morning, the moving trucks arrived at our house. I'd hired Allied Moving Services, the most professional company in the region, and paid extra for their premium packing service. 3 crews of experienced movers descended on the house, with military precision, armed with detailed lists of everything that belonged to me. Start with the living room. I told the crew chief, a efficient woman named Patricia, who'd coordinated moves for high-end clients across the Southeast. Everything in there goes except for the blue recliner and the small bookshelf in the corner. Watching them work was deeply satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. The sectional sofa I'd saved for 6 months to buy was carefully wrapped and loaded onto the truck. The coffee table I'd assembled myself after a 12-hour workday was professionally packed and secured. The entertainment center that had taken me an entire weekend to build was disassembled and prepared for transport. "Where do you want us to take the appliances?" one of the movers asked. "All of them," I confirmed. "Washer, dryer, refrigerator, dishwasher, microwave. The only thing staying is the basic electric stove that came with the house." While the crews worked in the main living areas, I focused on the bedrooms. From the master bedroom, I took the king-size bed, the dresser, the nightstands, and the expensive mattress I'd bought after my old one finally gave out. I left Mom's personal belongings neatly arranged in the closet and bathroom, but every piece of furniture I'd purchased was tagged for removal. From Cassie's room, I took the desk where she'd done her homework throughout high school, the chair I'd assembled when she complained about back pain, and the bookshelf where she kept her college textbooks. Her bed and dresser stayed since those had been hers since childhood, but the expensive computer monitor and gaming setup I'd bought for her studies were carefully packed and loaded onto the truck. The basement, which had been my living space for 9 years, was completely emptied. My tools, my workbench, my clothes, my personal belongings, everything that had made that cramped space livable. But I also took items from throughout the house that I'd purchased for general use. The vacuum cleaner, the lawnmower, the power tools, the ladder, the garden equipment. "What about this?" Patricia asked, pointing to an expensive-looking camera on the kitchen counter. I checked the receipt I'd saved in my files. "Mine," I said. "I bought it for Cassie's birthday last year, but since I paid for it, it's legally my property." The most emotionally difficult part was going through the kitchen. I'd replaced every appliance over the years as the old ones broke down or became obsolete. The stand mixer I'd bought for Mom's birthday, the coffee maker that had become essential for my early morning work schedule, the set of professional quality pots and pans I'd purchased when Mom complained that the old ones were making her food taste metallic. Even the dishes were mine. I'd bought a complete set of dinnerware 2 years ago when we hosted Christmas dinner for Dad's relatives. Mom and Cassie would be eating off paper plates until they could afford to replace what they'd never actually owned. As the movers worked, I made one final sweep through Mom's bedroom to document what was staying versus what was leaving. That's when I found something that made my blood boil all over again. Hidden in her jewelry box underneath the expensive necklaces and earrings she'd claimed were gifts from Dad. I found an acceptance letter from Emory University Medical School addressed to Cassie. The letter was dated 8 months ago and confirmed her acceptance into their program with a full academic scholarship covering tuition fees and living expenses. Medical school. Cassie had been accepted to one of the most prestigious medical programs in the Southeast with full financial support, and they'd never mentioned it to me. In fact, just 3 months ago, Mom had asked me to work extra weekend shifts because they needed help paying for Cassie's graduate school applications and standardized test fees. I photographed the acceptance letter, then kept searching. Behind the letter were financial aid documents showing that Cassie had received additional need-based grants totaling $31,000 per year. The grants were awarded based on a family financial hardship application that painted a picture of severe poverty and struggle. The hardship application was a masterpiece of deception. It described me as an unemployed family member with ongoing substance abuse issues who lived in their basement and contributed nothing to household expenses. It claimed that Mom was a single mother working multiple minimum wage jobs to support her daughter's education while caring for her disabled adult son. According to the documents, our family income was below the federal poverty line, and we were at risk of losing our home due to inability to pay the mortgage. The application included fake pay stubs showing Mom earning just $800 per month from part-time work. Based on these lies, Cassie had qualified for maximum financial aid that would cover not only her medical school costs, but also provide her with additional living allowance money. Money that would be paid directly to her while I continued working 60-hour weeks to support them both. I added these documents to my growing collection of evidence, then called Williams to update him on what I'd found. Academic fraud is a federal offense, he told me. If the medical school discovers they've been deceived about your family's financial situation, your sister could face criminal charges and immediate expulsion. All financial aid would have to be repaid immediately. Add it to the list, I said. By early afternoon, the house looked like a completely different place. Without the furniture and appliances I'd purchased, the space felt hollow and bare. The living room contained only Cassie's old blue recliner and a small bookshelf holding Mom's romance novels. The kitchen had a card table and 2 folding chairs that I remembered from Dad's fishing trips. Mom and Cassie's bedroom still contained their personal belongings and the furniture they'd owned before I started contributing to the household. But the expensive upgrades and additions I'd provided over the years were all gone. I walked through each room one final time, taking photos to document the condition I was leaving everything in. The house was clean, undamaged, and perfectly functional. It just no longer contained thousands of dollars worth of furniture and appliances that had been purchased with my labor. The final item to be loaded was my pickup truck. Over the years, I'd made extensive modifications and improvements to make it more functional for construction work. I'd installed a custom toolbox, upgraded the sound system, and replaced the worn-out seats with high-quality alternatives. The truck was mine, paid for with my money and registered in my name, but I knew Mom and Cassie had come to think of it as family transportation. They would discover otherwise when they tried to find a way home from the airport. I left an envelope on the kitchen counter addressed to Linda and Cassie Thompson. Inside was a letter I'd spent hours writing and rewriting until every word conveyed exactly what I wanted to say. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've taken everything that belongs to me, which you'll discover is quite a lot more than you ever acknowledged. I know about the hidden bank accounts, the rental property, the forged life insurance policy, and your plans for my convenient workplace accident. I know about Cassie's medical school acceptance and the fraudulent financial aid application. I know everything. You both made the mistake of thinking I was too stupid and too loyal to ever see through your deception. You're right that I was loyal, but you severely underestimated my intelligence. I've documented all your crimes and turned the evidence over to my attorney. You have a choice to make. If you want to avoid criminal prosecution, you'll sign the legal documents that will be delivered to you tomorrow. You'll transfer ownership of this house and the rental property to me as restitution for the money you've stolen over the past 9 years. You'll close the fraudulent life insurance policy and stay out of my life permanently. If you refuse, you'll both be arrested within 24 hours. Mom will face charges for insurance fraud, forgery, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Cassie will face charges as an accomplice, and her medical school acceptance will be revoked when they learn about the fraudulent financial aid application. The choice is yours, but either way, I'm done being your victim. You raised me to believe that family means taking care of each other no matter what. I learned that lesson well, and I've been taking care of you both for 9 years while you plan to murder me for insurance money. Now I'm going to take care of myself for a change. Don't try to contact me. Don't try to find me. Accept the consequences of your choices and build whatever life you can with what you have left. Goodbye. Beau. I placed my house keys next to the envelope and walked out the front door for the last time as a member of that family. Patricia was waiting by the moving truck with the final paperwork for me to sign. Everything's loaded and secured, Mr. Thompson. We'll have everything unloaded and set up in your new place by 8 o'clock tonight. My new place was a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex 20 minutes away, closer to my job site, and far enough from my old neighborhood that I wouldn't accidentally run into Mom or Cassie around town. It wasn't as big as the house, but it would be entirely mine. As I drove away in my pickup truck following the moving convoy toward my fresh start, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 9 years. Complete freedom from the weight of other people's expectations and manipulations. Behind me, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, Mom and Cassie were probably toasting their successful vacation with expensive champagne, completely unaware that their world was about to collapse. They'd be landing in 3 hours to discover that their ATM had finally shut down permanently. At exactly 6:45 Sunday evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail. The phone rang again immediately. Then again. Then again. After the 5th call, I turned off my phone and focused on directing the movers as they set up my new apartment. By 9:30, everything was in place. My living room looked bigger and more comfortable than it ever had in the basement. My bedroom had windows that actually let in natural light. My kitchen was stocked with appliances I'd chosen and paid for myself. I turned my phone back on to find 23 missed calls and 15 text messages. The text messages told the story of their homecoming better than any novel could have. 4:15 p.m., Beau, what happened to the house? Call me now. 4:18 p.m., where is everything? What did you do? 4:21 p.m. This is not funny, Beau. We need to talk immediately. 4:25 p.m. Call me right now or I'm calling the police. 4:32 p.m. The police said this is a civil matter and you had the right to take your own property. Explain yourself. The messages continued with increasing desperation and anger as they discovered the extent of what I'd removed and began reading my letter. 5:47 p.m. Beau, honey, I don't know what you think you found, but we can explain everything. Please come home so we can talk about this like a family. 6:15 p.m. Cassie is having a panic attack. How could you do this to your own sister? She didn't do anything wrong. 6:28 p.m. Your accusations are completely insane. I would never hurt you. You're my son and I love you more than life itself. Come home and let's work this out. The final message was sent just 10 minutes before they started calling. If you don't call me back in the next hour, I'm driving to your job site tomorrow and making a scene that will get you fired. Don't test me. I decided it was time to respond. But instead of calling Mom back, I called Robert Williams. They're home, I told him, and they're not taking it well. That's exactly what we expected, Williams replied calmly. The legal documents will be served first thing tomorrow morning. A sheriff's deputy will deliver them personally and explain their options. Until then, don't respond to any of their attempts to contact you. What if they show up at my apartment? You have a restraining order that goes into effect the moment they're served with papers. If they violate it by coming to your home or workplace, call 911 immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Monday morning, I arrived at the Johnson construction job site 45 minutes early. I wanted to be surrounded by witnesses if Mom carried through on her threat to make a scene at my work. I didn't have to wait long. At 7:20, just as the morning shift was getting organized, Mom's Honda pulled into the parking area. Both Mom and Cassie got out and started walking toward the construction trailer where the crew chiefs held their daily briefing. But before they could reach the trailer, a sheriff's deputy intercepted them. I watched from my position near the equipment storage area as Deputy Martinez served them with legal papers and explained the situation. I couldn't hear everything that was said, but I could see their body language clearly. Mom went through every stage of grief in about 3 minutes. shock as she read through the documents, denial as she shook her head and tried to hand the papers back, anger as she started gesturing wildly and raising her voice, bargaining as she pointed toward the construction site, probably asking to speak with me. Finally, depression as her shoulders slumped and she leaned against her car for support. Cassie's reaction was more dramatic. She actually sat down on the ground and started crying loudly enough that several construction workers stopped what they were doing to stare. When Deputy Martinez explained the restraining order provisions, she stood up and started screaming my name across the job site. Deputy Martinez firmly guided them back to their car and waited until they drove away before approaching me. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Deputy Martinez. I've served the legal documents to Linda Thompson and Cassie Thompson as requested by your attorney. They've been informed about the restraining order and the consequences of violating it." "How did they react?" I asked. "About like you'd expect. Lots of denial and anger. The younger one kept insisting that this was all a misunderstanding and that you'd never follow through on the legal action. The older one seemed more aware of how serious the situation is." "Did they ask about talking to me?" "They did. I explained that all communication has to go through your attorney now. If they try to contact you, directly document it and call us immediately." After Deputy Martinez left my foreman, Jack pulled me aside. "Everything okay, Beau?" That looked pretty intense. I'd already decided to be honest with the people I worked with. These were good men who'd always treated me fairly, and I didn't want them to get dragged into family drama without understanding what was happening. "My family's been stealing from me for years," I said simply. "I finally figured it out, and I'm taking legal action to get my money back. They're not happy about it, but it's not going to affect my work here." Jack nodded slowly. "Well, if you need anything, or if they cause problems around the job site, you let me know. We take care of our people here." That afternoon, Williams called with an update. "Your mother and sister came to my office around noon," he said. "They wanted to negotiate." "What did they offer?" "Initially, they claimed the whole thing was a misunderstanding and offered to make things right by paying you back a small portion of what they'd taken. When I showed them the evidence you'd collected, their tone changed considerably." Williams explained that once Mom realized how much documentation I had, she'd tried a different approach. She'd offered to transfer ownership of the rental property to me and pay back $20,000 if I would drop the criminal charges and let them keep the house. "I told them that ship had sailed," Williams continued. "The settlement terms are non-negotiable. Full ownership of both properties, closure of the fraudulent life insurance policy, and the restraining order. If they don't accept those terms by Friday, we file criminal charges." "What did they say?" "Your mother asked for time to think it over. Your sister mainly just cried and kept saying this was going to ruin her life. I explained that her life was already ruined the moment she participated in insurance fraud and academic fraud. The only question now is whether she wants to make things worse by refusing to cooperate." Tuesday morning brought a new development. Williams called to inform me that Cassie's medical school had been contacted about the fraudulent financial aid application. The school's financial aid office is conducting an immediate investigation, he told me. "If they determine that false information was provided, your sister will be expelled and required to repay all aid money immediately." "How much money are we talking about?" "Based on the documents, you found approximately $93,000 over the 2 years she's been enrolled. That includes tuition fees, living allowances, and additional grants she received based on the hardship application." I felt a brief moment of sympathy for Cassie. Having to repay nearly $100,000 would be financially devastating for someone just starting their career. But then I remembered the text messages where she'd laughed about how easy it was to manipulate me, and the sympathy disappeared. Wednesday, I received a call from Marcus, my friend at work who I'd listed as my new emergency contact. "Hey, Beau, I got a weird call at work today," he said. "Some woman claiming to be your mother called the main office trying to get your new address. She told them there was a family emergency, and she needed to reach you immediately. What did they tell her? Nothing. Company policy is that we don't give out personal information about employees. But she was pretty persistent. She called back 3 times and finally got transferred to HR. They told her that all family communication has to go through your emergency contact, which is me. Did she ask you for my information? Oh yeah. Gave me this whole sob story about how you'd had some kind of breakdown and moved out without telling anyone where you were going. She said the family was worried about your mental health and just wanted to make sure you were safe. Marcus had known me for 4 years and had heard me talk about my family situation many times. He'd always thought it was strange that a grown man was still living in his mother's basement and turning over his entire paycheck to support relatives who didn't seem to appreciate his sacrifices. I told her you seemed perfectly fine to me, and that if there was a real emergency, she could contact you through your lawyer, Marcus said. She didn't like that answer very much. Thursday afternoon, Williams called with news that the medical school investigation had concluded. Your sister has been expelled effective immediately, he reported. She's also been referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution for financial aid fraud. What about the money she owes? The school wants full repayment within 30 days, or they'll pursue civil litigation. Nearly $100,000 plus penalties and interest. And if she can't pay, then she'll face additional charges for theft of federal financial aid funds, which is a felony with potential prison time. Friday morning arrived with no word from Mom or Cassie about accepting the settlement terms. At 5 o'clock that afternoon, Williams filed criminal charges against both of them. By 6:30, they were both under arrest. Mom was charged with insurance fraud, forgery, theft, by deception, and conspiracy to commit murder. Cassie was charged as an accomplice to the insurance fraud and separately charged with federal financial aid fraud. Their bail was set at $50,000, each, money they didn't have since their savings were tied up in property they couldn't access, and credit cards they'd maxed out during their Hawaii vacation. They would spend the weekend in county jail, giving them plenty of time to think about whether they still wanted to refuse the settlement offer that could have kept them out of prison. On Sunday evening, Williams called with their decision. They want to take the deal, he said simply. All charges dropped in exchange for full property transfer and the restraining order. They'll sign the papers tomorrow morning. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt satisfied that justice was finally being served. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired and sad that it had come to this. Tired of carrying the weight of their betrayal. Sad that the people who were supposed to love me most had instead seen me as prey to be consumed. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something else growing. Something that felt like the first hint of genuine peace I'd experienced in years. It was over, finally completely over. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my own house, making coffee in my own coffee maker, watching the sun rise through windows that belonged to me and no one else. The legal proceedings had wrapped up exactly as Williams predicted. Mom and Cassie signed the settlement papers, rather than face decades in prison, transferring full ownership of both properties to me in exchange for dropping criminal charges. The restraining order was made permanent, meaning they could never contact me or come near any property I owned. Mom had been forced to sell her hidden savings and liquidate her jewelry collection to help Cassie pay back the financial aid money. They'd moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, both working multiple minimum wage jobs to make ends meet. The luxury lifestyle they'd built on my labor was over permanently. Cassie would never be able to attend medical school again. Her expulsion and the fraud charges had been reported to the National Medical Licensing Boards, effectively blacklisting her from any healthcare career. She was working as a cashier at a grocery store and a server at a chain restaurant, struggling to pay back the remaining debt from her fraudulent financial aid. I should have felt sorry for them, but I didn't. They'd made their choices with full knowledge of what they were doing. The consequences they were facing were entirely the result of their own actions. Meanwhile, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The first major change was my work situation. With the financial pressure of supporting Mom and Cassie removed, I'd been able to reduce my hours to a normal 40-hour week. For the first time in 9 years, I had evenings and weekends free to live my own life. I'd used that freedom to finally finish my engineering degree through an online program designed for working adults. It took me 8 months of night classes and weekend study sessions, but I graduated with honors and immediately received job offers from 3 different engineering firms. I accepted a position with Henderson Engineering, a respected firm that specialized in sustainable construction projects. The salary was nearly double what I'd been making in construction, and the work was exactly the kind of challenging, intellectual problem-solving I'd always dreamed of doing. But the best part of my new career was that it felt like mine. Every paycheck belonged to me. Every success was the result of my own efforts and talents, not something that would be taken away to fund someone else's luxury lifestyle. The rental property that had been secretly generating income for Mom was now providing me with $850 per month in legitimate rental income. I'd used part of that money to make improvements to the property, increasing its value and allowing me to charge higher rent to quality tenants who appreciated having a responsive landlord. The house where I'd lived in the basement for 9 years had been completely renovated. I'd torn down the wall between the kitchen and dining room, creating an open-concept living space that felt twice as large. I'd converted the basement into a proper home office where I could work on engineering projects and continue my education. Most importantly, I'd furnished every room with items I'd chosen myself, creating a space that reflected my own tastes and priorities rather than someone else's manipulation of my generosity. But the biggest change in my life wasn't the house or the career or the financial security. It was Sarah. I'd met Sarah Mitchell at a coffee shop near the Henderson Engineering offices. She was a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare, and she'd been studying for her nurse practitioner certification at a corner table where I'd started doing my own coursework. We'd struck up a conversation about the challenges of pursuing advanced education while working full-time, and I'd found myself telling her about my long journey back to finishing my engineering degree. She'd been impressed by my determination and curious about what had motivated me to finally pursue my dreams after so many years of delay. I'd been honest with her about my family situation, explaining that I'd spent my 20s supporting relatives who turned out to be taking advantage of my loyalty. Sarah had listened without judgment, sharing her own experiences with family members who'd tried to manipulate her success for their own benefit. The hardest part, she'd said during one of our early conversations, is learning that love shouldn't come with a price tag attached. Real family supports your dreams instead of consuming them. Sarah understood what it meant to work hard for everything you achieved. She'd put herself through nursing school while working as a hospital aide, graduated without debt, and built her career through competence and dedication, rather than manipulation or entitlement. When I invited her to see my house for the first time, she'd walked through every room with genuine appreciation for the work I'd put into making it my own. "This feels like a home," she'd said as we sat on my back deck watching the sunset over the neighborhood where I'd once felt trapped. "Everything here reflects who you are as a person. It's honest." Honest. That was exactly what my life had become. Honest work, honest relationships, honest achievements that belonged to me because I'd earned them fairly. 3 months ago, Sarah and I had started talking about moving in together. Not because either of us needed financial help or emotional rescue, but because we enjoyed each other's company and wanted to build something together as equal partners. It was the first relationship I'd ever had where I wasn't expected to sacrifice everything for the other person's benefit. Sarah had her own career, her own goals, her own financial independence. She appreciated my contributions to our relationship, but she didn't need me to subsidize her entire existence. The difference was remarkable. Instead of feeling drained and used, I felt energized and valued. Instead of working constantly to meet someone else's demands, I had time and energy to invest in my own growth and our shared future. Last week, Sarah had suggested that we start looking at houses together, Maybe something larger where we could both have home offices and room for the family we'd started talking about having someday. I want us to find something that's ours from the beginning, EE, she'd said. A place where we're both on the mortgage, both making decisions, both building equity together. The idea of truly shared ownership, truly shared responsibility, truly shared benefits felt revolutionary after 9 years of one-sided financial arrangements disguised as family obligation. This morning, as I finished my coffee and prepared to leave for another day at a job I loved, I reflected on the deeper lessons I'd learned from this experience. The most important lesson was about the difference between love and manipulation. Real love encourages your growth and celebrates your success. Manipulation disguises itself as need and uses guilt to extract resources while giving nothing meaningful in return. I'd also learned that family isn't determined by blood relationship alone. My coworkers at Henderson Engineering, who respected my skills and appreciated my contributions, felt more like family than the people who'd raised me. Sarah, who supported my dreams and expected nothing from me except honesty and mutual respect, was more of a sister to me than Cassie had ever been. The final lesson was about the importance of boundaries. For years, I'd believed that setting limits on what I was willing to sacrifice made me selfish and ungrateful. I'd learned that boundaries weren't walls to keep people out, but foundations that allowed healthy relationships to grow. When someone truly cares about you, they respect your boundaries because they want you to thrive. When someone only cares about what you can provide for them, they view your boundaries as obstacles to overcome. As I locked my front door and walked to my truck, I felt the same sense of freedom and possibility that had sustained me through the difficult months of legal proceedings and family dissolution. I was 30 years old, financially stable, professionally successful, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than what they could extract from me. For the first time in my adult life, my future belonged entirely to me. The phone rang as I was driving to work. Sarah's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered with the hands-free system. "Good morning, beautiful," I said, smiling at how natural it felt to express affection without calculating the cost. "Good morning yourself," she replied. "I found 3 houses online that I think we should look at this weekend. They're all in neighborhoods with good schools, and they're all within our budget if we're both contributing equally to the down payment. Our budget, both contributing equally. The language of genuine partnership instead of exploitation. Send me the links," I said. "I'll look at them during lunch, and we can talk about scheduling tours." "I love you, Beau," Sarah said before hanging up. "I'm proud of the life you've built for yourself." As I pulled into the Henderson Engineering parking lot, I realized that everything good in my current life had become possible only after I'd found the courage to walk away from people who saw my love as weakness to be exploited. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is refusing to allow others to consume your life in the name of family obligation. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave behind people who only value what you can provide rather than who you are as a person. And sometimes the most beautiful chapter of your story begins the moment you stop letting other people write it for you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members took advantage of your generosity? What would you do if you discovered the people closest to you were planning something that would harm you for their own benefit? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal and building authentic relationships. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize your own well-being even when family members try to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your life belongs to you, and you have the right to surround yourself with people who truly value and support who you are. Remember that real love never requires you to sacrifice your dreams, your security, or your self-respect. Until next time, take care of yourselves and choose relationships that honor your worth.